Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted to be a gentleman, attract a gentleman, or help mold a gentleman in your life, then do we have the Return of the Gentleman show for you. Today I'll be talking with Dr. Dain Heer, the best-selling author of one of my favorite books, Being You, Changing the World, the co-creator of Access Consciousness, and the author of an exciting upcoming book, The Return of the Gentleman. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about what it means to be a real gentleman, to find a real gentleman, how to know you have a gentleman, and what a real gentleman looks like in this world. That, plus we'll talk about 800-pound gorillas, 6-ounce mouses, what's wrong with being a doormat, a Ferrari 488 Spider, and what in the world dressing up for tea parties has to do with anything. So, gotcha. Welcome back to the show, Dain. Are you ready to shine?
I am so ready, Michael. Nice to be with you again.
Oh, great.
As always.
Woohoo!
Woohoo!
Great to have you here. And before we dive right into things, 17 years ago, and I'm thinking of the number 17. 17 is the place I got in the race last night, which I guess wasn't so hot. But we may go there later. 17 years ago, you had what you described as, quote, a perfect woman. What was going on? What was your self-worth like? And were you a real gentleman?
Oh, my. Well, so many questions. Too little time to answer them all appropriately. But let me give the bullet points. What was going on was I was starting my second chiropractic practice. I was in Santa Barbara. I had this woman that I thought was the perfect woman for me. And let's just say that I was doing my best to be a gentleman, even though I didn't really know that I could. I didn't know what was possible. I was with somebody who didn't really care for me, didn't really honor me. She wanted to be with somebody who had a lot of money and some status. And I was a chiropractor, so that was okay, good enough. Even though she was like, you're not a real doctor. And so I really had to start looking at things from a different place, because as soon as we got engaged, I felt the walls closing in, and I wasn't excited. I wasn't happy to plan the marriage. And I at least knew that. I at least knew that if this is going to be my future, I should at least be happy about it and grateful for it, which is what I thought would be the case when I asked her to marry me. It wasn't. And so we ended up breaking up a couple months later. And it was one of the greatest gifts of my life. But what it did is it really made me look at this idea of male-female relationships, male-male, female-female. The same things apply because you're in a relationship with somebody. But it really started me looking in this area of what's actually required on both sides to make things work. And how can we as men be the best us that we can be, to honor the women in our lives, to care for them, to acknowledge them, but also not be doormats. I may be stepping in, you were bringing that up already, but it's like so many men have this idea that, well, if I'm going to honor my woman, then I'm going to let her do everything she wants, and I'm not going to have a life. I'm not going to have me. I'm going to just make everything about her. And I think a lot of us men get there because we actually care about women, and we want to do what we think is an antidote to all the wrongness that has been done to women by men on this planet. Only we're going about it the wrong way.
And it's something that guilty as charged, even though you didn't actually give the charge. I have had doormat syndrome in the past and gotten the Macarena danced on me more than a few times because I was trying to be the, quote, nice guy.
Yes. The difference between nice guy and gentleman is universes. They're universes apart. See, the thing is, as a gentleman, you have such a sense of you, and it's interesting because I know that for example, most of the people listening to your show, a higher percentage are going to be women. It's the same thing in the work that I do, because the women out there are the ones who I want to call them like the warrior women in the best of ways. In other words, they're willing to see something different. They're willing to seek a different possibility, and they're willing to go in that direction to make it happen and not let anybody stop them. And so part of this conversation really is actually directed at them. In some of the YouTube videos that I've done on this subject, Return of the Gentleman, it's very interesting to me to have a lot of comments from men saying, thank you, this is a totally different conversation, but get a lot more comments even from women saying, thank you so much. I knew this was possible for men to be this. And like one lady said, I had my husband listen to this And I feel like I've got back the man that I married, and he had slowly given himself up for me over the years, and I couldn't stop it. So it's really time for a different conversation that really involves and engages men and women, and actually allows this different space to occur where a man can actually be the kindness that he is. He can be very caring for his woman, but he can also be the potency that he is. He can also provide, bring home the bacon, so to speak, and he can also be sexual, and none of that is wrong. And the difficulty begins when we start cutting off parts of us to try to fit some ideal or almost like the anti of some other point of view.
Mhm.
And then we cut off these parts of us, and soon the woman we're in relationship with is looking at us going, where did you go? Like, grow a set of balls. Come on, you know?
So let's go in that direction. Kind, gentle, easy, good. I'm thinking to myself, going to the race last night, and I don't know why I'm racing again. I haven't figured this out. It's a call. It's something. I'm journaling. I'm doing my automatic writing
because it's awesome and fun.
I guess that's it, and it's me being a little bit of my caveman me. It's me wanting to go out and have my hunt, my experience, I guess get that testosterone going, and part of what it means to be truly me. And I've said that statement for a reason. That's a loaded statement. What does it mean to be truly you?
Well, this example of you racing is a great example of it, because so many of us, and this applies to men and women, we start cutting off the things that we love, the things that contribute to us, if they don't come directly from the person we're in relationship with. That's insane. So we're now, like you used to love racing, for example. So you cut it off, and it has all of its reasons, oh my gosh, I'm busy. The podcast is taking off. We don't have time. We have a baby now, blah, blah, we're moving. We have all kinds of reasons and justifications. But what that ends up creating is this space where now the person you're with becomes the sole source for everything for you. That is not a nice thing to put on anybody's shoulders. And it's not possible for them to do it. And so we have these sources outside of our relationship, like racing for you, as a great example where you get more of you get more energized, your body feels more alive, and you feel like, yes, I'm here and I have value as the man that I am. And then what you do is you bring that back to the relationship, and the relationship gets greater. This idea that so many people have of my boyfriend, my girlfriend should stop doing everything they love that is not about me is killing our relationship. So me truly being me, us truly being us, is where we actually have access to all of our cylinders, everything that we have going on. So, for example, so many of the men that I work with are some of the kindest, sweetest men you would ever meet. And they really like sex, and they really like pleasing a woman or pleasing a man if they're gay. And they love this, but they've tried to cut off some part. What happens is they try to cut off the kindness to not be a doormat, or they try to cut off the sexualness to not be the sexual that guys are supposed to be. But what I found is when you have it all, you can actually be a kind, caring person. You can have women's backs. You can support women's rights, and you can love having sex with women and be highly sexual too. We have this weird thing in the world where we can't be all of that. We live in a world of stereotypes and boxes where we try to put people in this box or this box or this box. And that is not being all of you. That is being so much less than you actually are.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And on that note, there's a word that comes to me, which is value, or valuing yourself, because you're valuing aspects to please just focus on pleasing somebody else. You're devaluing yourself. And if you devalue yourself, they're no longer going to value you either.
Exactly. And that's exactly how it works. And it's funny because on the one hand, it's totally intuitive and in our awareness. On the other hand, it's totally counterintuitive, because we keep having this idea that if we just direct enough energy at them and show them how much we love them and how much we care about them, then they're going to feel loved, and then everything will be okay. But like, for example, I had a good friend, female friend, and she and her husband were going through some weird stuff. And then he did a major screw up with their finances. And then, so they had been apart for like a week because she was traveling, and he really wanted to make things work. So he started being like this needy puppy dog. Like she got home and he picked her up, and, she was in the bathroom. He's like, "Do you need toilet paper?" He just went over the top on trying to prove that he cared. And then she called me. She's like, "Can you help me, please?" She's like, "I get that he cares, but I want to kick him in the teeth. Like, this is just too much. I don't know what to do." I'm like, "I know." I'm like, "Please get where he's coming from. He's trying to show you that he screwed up. He knows he screwed up, and he's trying to show you how much he cares about you." And she went, "Okay, I get it. Okay, I will deal with it from that place then." And they eventually worked it out. Now they're really cool together again, which is really awesome. But that thing that we do of just trying to make that person the focal point of everything, we think it's going to show them that we care and undo past wrongs and all this. It does to a certain degree, but if you lose you in the process, your relationship is done for. And your relationship with you is done for.
On that note, then, if we go back 17 years ago, how did you start to change your self-worth?
Well, I started this thing that I now do that, called Access Consciousness. I had one session because I was literally at a place where I was going to end my life, because I had this relationship thing and I knew it wasn't working, and I didn't want to be there anymore, but I really felt like I couldn't tell her, because I was like doormat of the century. I was like sensitive new age guy of the universe, I was like snag extraordinaire. And so I couldn't, in my mind, tell her. And so I went and I had a session of this Access Consciousness, and I got this lightness, and I looked and I just had all these choices available. And I was like, wow. So then I asked a question. Well, a great question you can ask is, if I do this, what will my life be like in 5 years? And you just get the sense of it. Like, does my life go like this or stay the same? And if I don't do this, what will my life be like in 5 years? And so I looked at that and I went, wow, okay, I've been unhappy in this relationship for a while, extremely unhappy since since I asked her to marry me. Like, it took the unhappiness level to a factor of 10 times. And I went, okay, so if I stay together, what's my life going to be like in 5 years? And I was like, I didn't see past 2.5 years, because I was like, wow, I don't think I'm going to be here longer than 2.5 years if we stay together. And I went, if I break up with her, what will my life be like in 5 years? And it was like, whoa, it had so much more space to it. So I went home to her, and I ended up ending the relationship. And it was one of the greatest gifts I could have ever given both of us. Because what we also don't realize is that if it's not working for us and we're having to give up us to make it work for them, it's actually not working for them either. There's a different choice available somewhere in some way, either together or apart, that's actually greater for both of us.
And so you made changes. How did you then begin cranking up the liking of you? And I'm asking that because that's one of the most challenging things, male or female, for us to do, and particularly in a world where we've been taught, I don't want to pick on religion or anything, but original sin, there's something wrong with you. You are less than, you're not worthy.
Yes. What I did was I started noticing every time I would judge myself, and I would just go, stop. Like, I would literally, in my mind, put up my hands and go, stop. And then the other thing that I did was I started using this clearing statement that we have in Access Consciousness. And every time the judgment would come up, I would go, so everything that creates that, I now destroy and uncreate it. And then I would pock and pot it or run this clearing statement on it. And what would happen is it started chipping away at that mountain of judgment that I had lived under my whole life. And I'm going to say, what's funny was I distinctly remember within about a day of doing this, things started lightening up dramatically. And I was like, whoa, I'm looking around at my life, like sort of sensing the space of my life going, whoa, I didn't know it could be this awesome. This is really cool. That happened. And then that sort of stayed for a while. And then about 3 weeks into it, there was this other major change, because I was using this tool all the time. Just every time I went to judge myself or by somebody else's judgment of me, I would either go, okay, if it was my judgment, I'd go stop. Or if I was around somebody that was judging me, because that's one of the other things we get that we don't realize is we're around people who judge us. That has an intense impact in our world. It's like somebody stabbing you repeatedly but you're ignoring it. You're like, wait a minute, do you feel those dagger pricks? Wait, why is my face bleeding? And so what I started doing was, when I was around people who were doing judgment of me or somebody else, I would go, okay, so everything that makes me the effect of this, pock and pot all that. And over time in doing that, I remember about a month later, so like 3 weeks later, I had this boom thing. And then about a month later, I was walking around and I'm like, wow, I'm not thinking and I'm not judging me at all. This is really weird. This is really wonderful. What am I going to do with all this time and energy? And so that's what I did to start changing it. And that's why, that's why I do what I do, is because I want people to have tools. It's like, it's phenomenal to talk to people and inspire them and give them possibilities. But that's, like feeding a man a fish, or a person a fish, shall we say? But actually giving them a tool to change it is like showing them how to fish. And that's what I think is so vital, is us actually getting things that we can change things in the moment that compound over time.
Woohoo! So, with that said, I want to jump into more on the gentleman and on honoring yourself. But before we do that, since we're giving them tools today, would you mind sharing the Pock and Pod clearing statement?
Sure. So, also you can go to theclearingstatement.com, where I explain it. Okay. It's about a 15-minute explanation. But the clearing statement is right and wrong, good and bad, Pock and Pod, all 9, shorts, boys, and beyonds. Now, that's the long form for it, but basically it's taking into account your good and bad judgments you have around something that sticks you. The Pock stands for going back to the point of creation of wherever you started it, or the point of destruction, wherever you took something that was wonderful and undid it or let it go. And then the shorts, the boys, and the beyonds are all these different aspects of it that make it more effective. And I think one of the biggest things about that is this thing called the boys, is where if you have been feeling like you've been peeling the layers of the onion of an issue, it could be that it's actually this thing called a nucleated sphere, which basically looks just like an onion, but it's an energetic onion. And you'll work on it and you'll pop one layer and you feel free. And then 2 days later, it grows back in and you're like, wait a minute, I thought I just let that go. Well, if you add this to whatever you're working on, in whatever way you're trying to change something, if you have this clearing statement, part of what goes along with that is undoing the judgments, undoing wherever you created the limitation in the first place, because most limitations started a long time ago. They're just a lot bigger now. They roll like snowballs downhill and gather up crap as they go. And then this other thing, this nucleated sphere, undoing that takes away that thing where it keeps recreating itself. So this clearing statement really is kind of like a magic wand. It's a way of literally changing anything in your life you want to change. And people hear it and they're like, oh, and just because it sounds so weird, they kind of discount it sometimes. But what I say is try it out. I mean, you have absolutely nothing to lose, and perhaps everything to gain, especially if you're one of those seekers who's been trying to change all these things in your life, but they only change for a limited time, which was what my experience was 18 years ago. And when I started using this, everything literally started changing, but it stayed changed and then changed even more in the future.
Awesome. So I've got to ask, what is boys and shorts?
You could say boys in shorts, like the girls at the high school did at one point. Their mom was coming to access classes and saying this at home, and they would go, boys in shorts and boys and berries and beyonds, and it was great. And it still worked, which is really funny. The boys are, actually, the boys are these nucleated spheres that we just talked about. And the shorts stand for what's meaningful about this, what's meaningless about it, and your punishments for it and the rewards for it. And I think the biggest thing I would say about that is one of the things we do when we don't know how to deal with something is we try to make it meaningless. Like we just throw it into the universe like space debris. The problem is because we don't actually handle it, we just decide it's meaningless because we can't deal with it. It eventually rains back down on our head. Like my friend Gary, who rolled the toothpaste tube from the end, he was an Indian, and both of his wives squeezed the toothpaste tube in the middle. And he was like, I can't get upset about that. That's not meaningful. I love them. That can't be meaningful. I love them. But it would happen every single day. And so finally, one day, 6 months later, he was upset about something else. He walks into the bathroom. They're squeezing the toothpaste tube in the middle. He's like, goes into one of those numbers. And it was because he had made it all meaningless. So it rained back down on his head. So what I would ask people is, how many things in your life have you tried to make meaningless that actually are meaningful for you? And everything connected with that, will you destroy and uncreate it, please?
It sounds like when you are making something meaningless, you're not actually, you're giving it more power by stuffing it down. Yep. So it's going to come back with a vengeance.
Yep, that's exactly what it is. This thing about the clearing statement is just, you can use the short form POC and POD, and even bringing it up. I mean, you're one of the few people that interviews me that will actually talk about it, because most people are like, oh, let's stay away from that. I don't even want to get in that deep water. So if you're listening to it and you're like, what the heck is going on? Don't worry about it. Use it, don't use it. But I want people to know it's available, because it is a potent tool to make sure the change you're asking for actually sticks.
What I like about it is, and it's what I like, I've got a bracelet with me here, which has it in Sanskrit, Om Mani Padme Hum. And what's great about this phrase and other clearing statements and other mantras is, the more that it's used, the more, to me, it puts an energetic groove into the universe, or into the record of the universe. So the more people who are pod and pocking, the more powerful it becomes.
Exactly. And the more you do it, it's exactly that, and I envision a world where our lives don't have to be so much about problems and difficulties, but actually about possibilities, and that's what I would like to help create.
Woohoo! Woohoo! So let's talk about honoring ourselves. What does it mean? Like, how does a gentleman do this? How does a woman, I don't know, how you can support somebody if they're not honoring themselves. My God, there is no way to do that. How do we honor ourselves?
Yeah, and you're exactly right. If somebody's not willing to honor themselves, really tough to support them in doing that, because no matter how much permission you give them to do something, they're still going to function from that place. So what you have to look at is, you need to ask a question. Okay, so as a woman trying to get a man to honor himself, for example, you have to ask a question. Okay, what can I say and do that will actually get him to choose for him and to choose to be him? And it's different for each person that we're with. And so in looking at this, it's like it's not something that we're taught. And, like for me, for example, I was taught by my mom and by my grandmother, who took me under her wing because neither of my parents really wanted to have much to do with me. So I was taught by her that you always honor a woman, and that whatever a woman wants is what is more important than what you want. And that's basically what she told me this in words. And I was like, okay, grandma, because I love my grandma. So getting to honoring us, part of it is we have to look at the points of view that we bought from other people as the way the world works, as how we have to be as people, as how we have to be in relationship. That's first. And then we have to look at it and go, okay, so what part of this is actually contributing to something greater in the relationship, and what part of it is detracting from the relationship and detracting from me? Because until we start to get some awareness of that, we're sort of going on that old autopilot continuously. And so it's part of it is actually breaking down the autopilot. So one thing I would suggest that people do is write down, okay, everything I do to honor my partner, everything I do to honor me, how do I dishonor me in this relationship? How is my partner dishonoring themselves in this relationship? Now, this is an interesting, that requires a level of vulnerability that is kind of off the charts. So it might be easier if that seems really confrontational. Well, if it seems confrontational, you might want to do it anyway. There's some gold in there for you. But it might be easier to just go for that, just the honoring part. But then look at that and go, is any of how I'm honoring my partner dishonoring me? And is there any way in which I'm actually dishonoring them with what I'm choosing is honoring me? Is that confusing or just in my head?
I think we've got it.
Okay, cool. But that's the start. With the information is where it starts, or the awareness is where it starts.
It also brings up another important term that we get to discuss when it comes to a gentleman, and this is a real tricky one, and it's kind of threading a needle today. What does it mean to be vulnerable?
Vulnerable is where you show up exactly as you are, warts and all,
Mhm.
and don't have to try to cover them up, don't have to try to pretend they're not there.
Mhm.
And also, you don't have to apologize for it, but you also don't have to do that forceful thing of trying to pretend that it's not there. And really, that's where you look and go, hey, you know what? Here I am. I'm the best me I can be today. I'm doing my best to be an even better me for tomorrow, but here's who I am today. And I think that's a simple way to state it.
And it comes to another thing, which is earlier you were talking about coming from a place of non-judgment. There's also a level of trust that you have to have with yourself, because when you say, I'm bringing all that I've got for today, that implies that you actually trust and believe in yourself.
Yes. And this is, see, the elements of intimacy,
Mhm.
as I would describe them, uh, are honoring, trust, allowance, vulnerability, and gratitude. And if you have that with you, then you have a level of intimacy with you that unfortunately most people on the planet aren't really willing to have as intensely as possible. But you have a level of vulnerability with you that, or a level of intimacy with you. And when you have that with you, then you can have it with a partner. Until then, you're always sort of, it's like a tripod where one leg is a little too short.
Mhm.
It's always sort of like this. But you're correct. It requires a trust in ourselves. But the other thing, trust in self is actually like it's one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. And the weird part is we keep looking to trust people outside of us, like, oh, I can trust them, I can trust them, I can trust them, except then we trust some people, quote unquote, and then they do the exact opposite of what we trusted they would do. So then it becomes this other thing where now we don't want to trust, but really the only person you can trust is you. And what do I mean by that? Well, the only person that you can trust to be who they are
Mhm.
and choose to be who they are and actually have some say in the matter and some sense of being able to be part of it is you. Now, can you trust your mate? Yes. But you have to not trust from the place of blind faith,
Mhm.
which, like when you're with somebody who's an alcoholic and you go, oh, I trust that because I show them so much love, they're going to stop drinking. No, they're not. Trust that they're going to be exactly tomorrow who they were today. And if
Mhm.
you're okay with that, then the relationship will work. So this thing of trusting ourselves and having intimacy with us is that is another aspect of being a gentleman. Now, we're sort of veering of necessity, these conversations entail being a gentleman and relationship and how we function in relationship
Yep.
because they do go hand in hand. And that's also part of why I wanted to have the conversation and bring the conversation to the world because with what currently goes on between men and women, and is this thing that doesn't actually involve gentlemen being gentlemen and ladies being ladies. It involves a bunch of people who are totally confused, trying to do the best job they can with the tools they have available, but nobody's given them the tools, the concepts, the constructs. Nobody said, hey, you can be all that you are. You don't have to cut off any part of you. And that's actually greater for you and greater for your partner.
Awesome. And two directions I want to go on this. First off, most importantly, and this is a crazy big one. How do we grow that trust muscle or start to trust ourselves?
Great question. I wish I had a week to answer it because it involves so many aspects. But the first thing that we have to do is get over judging us as wrong. And see, from my point of view, and I've really mostly dynamic, mostly embrace this in my life. It's my life and living. But from my point of view, there really is no wrong choice. And I got to say, for me personally, the only person I've ever really judged as wrong is me, as most seekers in the world do to themselves. We call them humanoids because they're different. They're the seekers of the world looking for something different. But so, what the first part of that is to look back over the major things you've judged yourself as doing wrong Because what happens is when we do that, every time we judge ourselves as wrong, we trust ourselves a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less. And for those big things that we've done that we've decided are wrong, that we've been hiding sometimes for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, those things are really what happens is when you decide you're doing something wrong, what you do is you put a wall of energy around it that you have to now maintain with your creative energy. So part of your creative energy goes into hiding some part of you. And it's interesting because one of the things I do when I work with people is I ask them some questions to get what this thing is, and then together we unlock it. And when they come out of the wrongness of them, and we have sometimes some really big areas in which we're living in this wrongness, which causes us to never be willing to trust us and expect that other people won't trust us. By the way, as a side note, if you have a lot of people in your life that say they don't trust you, it's because you expect them not to trust you and you give them the information that you're not trustworthy because it's actually your judgment of you. You want to realize that the judgments other people have of us that we give a crap about are only the judgments that we have of us. And we teach people how to treat us. So in getting behind this wall of wrongness, I mean, I've seen people literally look 30 years younger and their body starts moving and they have every physical, emotional transformation you could imagine. And I see them a few months later and their entire world feels different. And so if we could recognize that there are things that we chose based on having the best information we had at the time and the best tools available that we had at the time, and they weren't necessarily the best tools, but we did our best with what we had available. And maybe write down, I'm wrong for this, or the top 5 or 10 or 20 things you think you're wrong for. See, I would do it. I got to say also, I would do it a different way if I were having a session with somebody or facilitating a class. I would just go into it and help them change it. So the tools that I'm giving you they're not as deep or as wide as I would like to, but it's not really the venue to be able to dive in and change it. Does that make sense?
Makes some sense. And if we veered off in that direction, we'd be having almost a counseling session.
Yeah, exactly. Which is great also, except it requires, in order to do it, it requires somebody who's got something real going on that we can change. Because then everybody who has that same real thing going on, it changes for them too, just while they sit there and listen, because they go on the same journey, which is the way consciousness works, which is awesome. So anyway, write down top 10 or 20 things that you have been holding over your head as the wrongness of you, or that somebody else has been holding over your head as the wrongness of you. And now ask yourself, what really happened here that I haven't acknowledged? If I did something right here, what did I do that I haven't acknowledged? And what's right about me that I'm not getting? And spend some time journaling or something about it. And you can use that clearing statement along the way for when weird stuff comes up and you feel like you can't get there. But it will start to get you to the place where you trust you, because the primary lack of trust in us is where we've decided we're wrong.
That makes sense. So I want to go to 2 other words that you had mentioned earlier, because you gave this list of 5. We'll get to gratitude in a minute, but first off, importance of allowance. Yes.
Allowance is where everything is just an interesting point of view. And the other side of that is alignment and agreement, and resistance and reaction. And alignment and agreement is where you make something real and true, even when it's not necessarily. And then you resist and react to it. So, for example, if somebody says to me, you're a jerk, allowance is, okay. What are they going to do with that? Alignment and agreement is, oh my God, they're right, I am a jerk. And then resistance and reaction is, I'm not a jerk, to try to prove that you're not what you just aligned and agreed that you were. So allowance is truly interesting point of view. I have this point of view. So in the way of a tool, excuse me, in the way of a tool, so everybody out there listening can just get some sort of upset or something that's occurred in your world where you still have that sort of yucky energy that you haven't been able to get rid of. Just get that energy. Okay. Now say, interesting point of view. I have this point of view to and about that energy. Cool. Usually it shifts even a little bit. Now to the energy that's there now, say, interesting point of view. I have this point of view. And usually it shifts a little bit again. And then to the energy that's there now, interesting point of view. I have this point of view. And again, interesting point of view. I have this point of view. Interesting point of view. I have this point of view. Okay. Michael, did you do it? And how's it feeling in your world?
Woohoo! So
Woo-hoo.
I did this bike race yesterday, and it was my first road race in 15 years. And I decided not to do the beginner category. Not that I don't feel like a beginner category, but out of safety, I wanted to be with more experienced riders, as I'm a more experienced rider. And I successfully got last place, Dane. And
Woohoo!
woohoo! Yeah. And so I come home and I'm going, maybe you should have done the beginner category. Interesting point of view, Dane. Interesting point of view.
So did it work? Did it change it at all?
Oh yeah, because I realized the insanity of it, and I had discussions with myself before it, and I did so much writing about it this morning and learning about it, and it actually pulled on what I call the golden thread and found all these tracings back to ancestry from my parents and my parents' parents that have to do with how I feel, as nutty as it sounds about this race. But what you just did, just like it cut some important energetic chords there. So thank you.
Cool. Oh, my pleasure. And thank you for doing it. And because having you do it, like when you do it, what happens is people can actually perceive the shift, or when they do it, they can actually perceive the shift. And this is for me, the thing that is vital about all this, if we're going to have some tools that we give to people, it has to work. Like doing airy-fairy stuff that doesn't actually create a change is of no interest to me. It's like, and even though some of the things I say can sound really weird to people if you've never heard it, it's like the reason I do it is only because it works. And this is another point of view I think we really need to adopt in our lives about us as gentlemen, about us as ladies, is like, let's do what works. Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. It's like, and how do you get to what works? You ask, okay, universe, show me what's actually going to work. I mean, it's not rocket science. It's called ask and you shall receive, which, it actually works. I think what happens is actually ask and you shall receive works so well that they hid it in the Bible so nobody would believe it.
On that note, as I'm going, thank you, Dane, what does gratitude have to do with this and being a gentleman?
Gratitude. Well, here's the thing. A gentleman lives from gratitude. So if you look at, for example, like going into a restaurant, there's somebody there, they open the door. You actually have gratitude for the fact that they've opened the door. Or as a gentleman, if there isn't somebody else opening the door, you open the door and you open it for your lady or your other gentleman as an expression of the gratitude for them and the honoring of them. And you actually, and so look from that energy for a moment. We'll put that here. And then the other side is somebody who doesn't have gratitude, who, somebody opens the door for them and they just brush right past you. They don't say thank you. They don't say hi. They don't give you a smile. They have a dirty look on their face and like, well, you owed me that. It's like, I mean, think about when you're kind and you slow down and let somebody in that needs to get in traffic and you get the wave, like, hey, thanks, it just brightens your day and you've been acknowledged for contributing to somebody. And what happens is now the gift has been received and the acknowledgement of that receiving has occurred in that gratitude. And so a gentleman lives his life from gratitude. He's grateful for the people in his life, grateful for himself. That's a weird one. Grateful for the life that he's actually created. And, if you look at this, like the Return of the Gentleman book, I say in there that this book is not just for men. This book is actually inclusive of women also. And we can look at this, but the reason I called it Return of the Gentleman is we live in a world where men need to be able to have a different conversation. And rather than the Me Too movement, which is, and not rather than, but as an acknowledgement of and expanding into something that we need to create a world in which all of that stuff is not even something any of us would allow to exist. And the way I see that occurring is, many women are stepping up and taking more of a role, taking more of a voice. And men have to step up too and be the gentlemen that we are, but also not from the point of view that we as men are inherently bad, which is the other thing so many women and men seem to have as a point of view, is that men are inherently bad and we're the reason for the world's problems. No, we're not the reason for the world's problems. Stupid male and female are the reason for the world's problems. It's not because we're a man that we have created this in the world. That is a heinous lie and a hideous lie and a horrendous assumption that does nothing to change things. It's like, I know just as many, in fact, maybe more at this point, more mean women than I do mean men, or at least just as many, let's say. Okay. I know as many limited women as I do men. It's not about the sex. It's about, we need to step up and be who we actually are, men and women, and every other gender classification that's there and available. And so that's really what this conversation is about. And what, for me, it's like it starts with gratitude for us. It's like this is vital that we actually get this sense of this gratitude. And when we do, we live from a totally different space where the gifts that other people are to us, they acknowledge that they've been they acknowledge in our gratitude, we acknowledge receiving the gift of them and the gift that they're giving. And the gift that they're giving is of themselves. It changes everything.
And that, I mean, when you go back to quote, stupid people, I'm using the more PC term here, let's say, or the more child-friendly term here. Those people also, they're suffering, they're struggling. And maybe one of our biggest struggles that is creating the beep people in the world is we're repressing who we truly are. We're trying to fit into a societal mold that is broken. That's this caveman thug thing, or cavewoman, I guess. And then it just pops back out in the worst possible ways because we're not being who we truly are.
Truly. And that is what this whole conversation is about. And the thing about being able to actually get there, and this thing about not being who we truly are. I mean, we started with this, at the very beginning. And so, but there's so many aspects to us actually being who we truly are. And I want to say one other thing is, I said the stupid bleep people. We have to be willing to be with each person exactly as we are, exactly as they are, exactly as we are, and not judge. What I tell people is don't judge someone else until you've walked a mile in their shoes. Okay. Now, my personal point of view is don't judge anybody else, period, because it's fruitless and counterproductive and not kind. But don't judge anybody else until you walked a mile in their shoes. You have no idea what is making this person do that. There was one guy who he was so mean, and everybody just hated being around him, and they never wanted to spend any time around him. And he came to an access class, and people just ran away from him, basically. And he asked me a question. And knowing this story about how everybody ran away from him and how mean he was, right? He asked me a question about something. And I said, so what's going on with you and other people? He's like, I don't like people. I went, okay. I said, when did that start? He went, well, 25 years ago. I went, what happened 25 years ago? He said, my wife, the love of my life, died, and I have not wanted to be around anyone ever since. And I was like, whoa, okay. But if you take that on face value, you do what you do. You know what I mean? And the thing about a gentleman is a gentleman will actually take the time and the space to look into somebody's world to see what is truly going on for them, but also to see what they can truly contribute.
How does a woman recognize a real gentleman?
A real gentleman, here's the interesting part about this, is oftentimes the true gentleman is the person the woman in the room won't even notice. Why? Because they're looking to find the person that they've judged as the right looking, right whatever package. But usually within that package, for a lot of women, is this idea that they're going to choose the guy that looks a certain way or has a certain thing going on, but usually they're looking for a guy that has the judgments of them that somebody else had, that if they can overcome that judgment, then they're finally a winner and not a loser. And this happens with men, with women also. It goes both ways. And so the reason I'm saying this is because the gentlemen, there's two ways in which they'll show up. One is they'll show up as a no count. In other words, they're not somebody who's proving that they're a winner. Mm-hmm. They're not somebody who goes around proving that they're a loser or functioning as a loser. They're like a no count, meaning they don't actually fit into that scheme of winner and loser. And so a lot of times a lady will just pass them over. And then the other way that a gentleman will show up is somebody where they're attracted to him, but they know they can't own him and control him, so they're also a little scared and intimidated, but not in that way of, oh, he's judging me, but in that way of, oh, he's a little bit more than I think I can handle. And so these are some clues that if you actually find a gentleman in your midst. But the other thing is the gentleman is actually going to be present with you. He's actually going to be engaged with you. And he's not going to be trying to prove that he's wonderful and perfect. He's just going to be there as him. And which is why I say oftentimes you'll think he's a no count because he's not trying to prove like all the other guys are. But there's another thing when somebody's truly being a gentleman where they have this pull energetically. And, and it just is because they're willing to engage with people in their world. It's kind of like you're attracted to them based on that, based on the fact that they're willing to have people engage in their world, and they don't have to try to shut anybody out, and they don't have to try to make themselves right. They don't have to make other people wrong. It's truly somebody who functions from the 5 elements of intimacy we talked about, but also from the no judgment of self. Different energy.
Woohoo! I'm thinking of Jack Black and Kung Fu Panda. They're operating from sheer awesomeness.
Exactly.
For women who have how should we call this? A gentleman in the marble. Is there a way to help chisel that marble and bring the gentleman out?
I would go back and listen to those 5 elements of intimacy that I taught. Okay, so let me just say it this way. Yeah. I've got these videos on YouTube called Return of the Gentleman. If you go to my webpage, you can find them. DrDainHeer.com. DrDainHeer.com. You can go there. There's a link there, but they're also on YouTube if you search and then search for Return of the Gentleman. They're there. And I did, I think, 5 different Google Hangouts with gentlemen. Mm-hmm. And I want to say in partial answer to this question, the reason this conversation even came up in my world was I had a friend who was, 20, he was 20 at the time, I think. And he had come and he'd been doing several Access classes, and he had hung out with me and Gary, the founder of Access. And we're business partners, travel together all the time. And this guy traveled with us several times. And we were at lunch one day after knowing him for about 3 years. He'd come and stayed in our house when he was 16. I'd totally forgotten about that. Stayed there for a month because he was so depressed and unhappy. His mom's like, I need to do something. And we're like, well, we'll take him. So we took him to all kinds of classes and changed the kid's life in a month. It was brilliant. It was wonderful. So anyway, I saw him again when he was 20, and he had been around for a while. And we were at lunch, and he said, somebody was talking about a gentleman or something. And he turned to me and he said, I have to thank you. And I was like, for what? He said, I've actually learned to be a gentleman from being around you. And I was like, me? He's like, yeah. He's like, you don't realize. He's like, from the time I was a teenager, he's like, I have been doing YouTube searches left and right to find out how to be a man. And the only thing I could find was how to manipulate women. Mm-hmm. And that was the only thing that was out there. He's like, and then I saw you. He's like, you were well dressed, you were sexual and you didn't hide it, but you honor women, you care for women, you do what you can to take care of people, and you actually are kind to people, and you have this other stuff going on, and you're willing to create, and you're willing to create money. He's like, I didn't know this could exist. And I was like, whoa, I didn't know that I was being or doing that. And it was that I was just blown away. I had no idea that this was having an impact on this kid's life. And there was another guy sitting there, was almost my age, who said this. He said, I have to second what he said. I didn't know it was possible. And I went, oh my God. And he also said, I've been doing all this internet research on how to be a man, and I never found it until hanging out with you guys. And I was like, this information needs to get out to the world. And that's where this thing came from. So part of the reason I'm saying this is because if you're with a man who's a gentleman in the rough at this point, realize he's never been taught. But what you have to ask yourself is, does he desire to be? Does he desire to actually change this? Is he willing to change it? Not what you want him to do, okay? Because we're back in the same old conversation if we go there. But does he desire to? Is he willing to? And then you need to ask, what can I contribute to making this happen? Which is also why I wrote the book, because I wanted in one place somebody who was actually interested, male or female, to have this concept of and this invitation and the tools to make it possible to be able to get it.
What's going to happen if they grab your book and they put it on the kitchen table in front of their partner?
I think that would be one great way of finding out whether they're actually interested or not interested. Or, you could, I was just thinking of, potentially creative ways of getting them to read it. I don't know. Well, let's not go into those creative ways right now. I think I will do something rare and shut up.
I can see the letters coming in now. Is there a place people can go to get the book, to pre-order the book, to find out more?
Yeah, at this point, I think it's going to have to be a pre-order because I just approved the final draft and all that stuff. Actually, though, yeah, you can go on Amazon.com, Return of the Gentleman. Should be in the next couple of weeks. You can go to accessconsciousness.com and search in the shop there. You can go to my website, which I already gave you, which is drdanehere.com.
Yep.
And it will soon be available with all the usual suspects where you might want to buy a book, find a book.
Fantastic. So, on that note, what one homework assignment would you give people today on this topic?
2 homework assignments. Sorry, you know me. I like that. I do way too much, or talk way too much or something. One is, what can I choose today that would be honoring of me? And if you're with somebody in a relationship, also honoring of my partner. What one thing can I do today to honor my partner and honor myself? It doesn't have to be the same thing. So those are basically 2 separate questions. And then the other thing is, what I would ask you to do, maybe just for the next 3 or 4 days, and then if it works, do it more. What's right about me, I'm not getting. Because we keep looking at what's wrong. Asking this question opens the door to actually see that maybe and probably there's something right about you. Starts to change your perspective on you.
Woohoo! All right, Dane, any last words of wisdom for people here today?
Yes. I just want to say that it truly is possible. And the space is available now in the world to actually be everything you are. And I do mean everything you are, and come out of the judgment and into the space that creates a sense of connection with the people in your life that you care about, where you can actually honor them and honor you, be an allowance and gratitude for them and for you. Trust you enough to know when to trust them, and create this space where you have true intimacy with others without giving up any part of you. And what if you truly being you are the gift, the change, and the possibility this world requires? And I would say now's the time to be it.
Amen. And woohoo!
Woohoo!
And just as you went 2 questions or 2 answers, and I was saying that's my final one, I have got to ask, and Jessica would demand, no, she'd be kinder than that. Maybe not. Maybe she would demand that I ask, what do parents do to help their sons become gentlemen?
Excellent question. First is to acknowledge their awareness when they have it, and do not make them wrong, and do not lie to them to make your life easier. In other words, be straight with your kids. I had a friend who's he had 3 kids actually, and their mom committed suicide, and everybody else was trying to pretend that she didn't. And when they said, "Where's mommy?" he told them what happened. And these kids are present, they're vulnerable, they're kind, they're potent. Don't lie to your kids. Now, sometimes you have to. We all know as parents, I'm not a parent, but I'm an honorary parent of thousands. That sometimes, you're not always going to be telling the direct truth about something. But rather than using that as a parenting method, rather than using lying, use honesty and recognize that your kids are infinite beings in little bodies. You don't just become a true being when you turn 18 or whatever the voting and drinking age is. They already are. They just have small bodies. What our job is actually to empower them to step into their awareness of their awareness, but also how to navigate the world. And if you're honest with them and are also willing to do whatever it takes to get them to start to see the greatness in them, you create a totally different possibility. And from my point of view, our job as parents is actually to empower our kids to know and show them how to navigate the world to create what they desire, and not make them wrong for whatever it is they desire, but show them how they can actually have it if they're really desiring to get it. And that conversation itself could go on for another couple hours.
But still, thank you, thank you, thank you. So with that said,
man.
Woohoo! Goes both ways. Love it. So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get the return of the gentleman, and begin rediscovering your true self, being you, changing the world today, and shine bright. Woohoo! I love it, Dane. As always, I love it, I love it, I love it.
Thank you, my friend. So great to be with you, as always. And next time you go to enter the bike race, just ask which will create the most and which will be the most fun. And you'll know.
I think I'm back to the beginner category.
That's not back. That's a temporary thing that's appropriate.
It's totally good. There was a technical decision made that wasn't, I don't believe, based out of ego last night, which was based of all my past experience. I don't want to ride with a category with less experienced bike handlers. However, in this particular niche of the country out by Aspen, Colorado, everybody is born and bred of a former Olympian. And so their skill level is much higher. And so they're safe, and I just want to play. I don't need to be the best of the best. I don't need to be anything. But it'd be nicer to play if I can hang in there with everybody. I did finish.
Yeah. Well, there's a conclusion. See, when you go based on past experience, or based on this or based on that, you've just taken yourself out of being present with what's in front of you. You're looking backwards and judging that based on what was back there. So instead, and don't get me wrong, it's like we all do it, just that's not, it's just if you instead go, okay, so talk about the past, fuck that shit, what do I know? What's going to be the most fun? What will my life be like in 5 years if I do this? What will my life be like in 5 years if I do this? And just, or I'd really like what's going to be the most fun, and just go with whichever one seems to create the most fun.
There was a fear factor. There's a fear factor because I don't know the riders. I don't know their skill level. And the only time that I've been hurt on the bike in the last 20 years was sprinting against a quote-unquote lesser rider. And so I had made a rule that said you don't mess with lesser riders. Now, I competed on the world level. It's hard to not compete with lesser riders, but I was trying to draw some line. After I watched them race, they did their race before me, the beginner race, I was like, oh, that would have been fun.
Yes. Oh, now you know.
Now I know. Back to the 10-year-olds and 80-year-olds, and I like it because I did one other race 2 weeks ago, and I got second or third to last in the beginner on the mountain bike, and that was actually a ball. I had an absolute blast in that one.
Exactly. Go for the fun, my friend.
Thank you.
Go
Thank you. Thank
for
you.
joy. Thank you. I adore you, and you guys have way too much fun, and I look forward to talking again.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!